Do you like wrestling? Do you like witty banter? Because this week's episode of Be Hero Fights is brought to you by the Midcard Podcast.
We know what you're thinking. Another wrestling podcast. But that's where you're wrong. We're the Seinfeld of wrestling podcast. We talk about life, our wives, our dogs, our girlfriends on the side. So come take a drive, take a seat, and take a mental vacation with the Midcard. New episodes every Saturday, anywhere you get your podcast from, or you can reach out to us on the social media. We're at TMidcard on Twitter, at the Midcard on Facebook, and of course, at the Midcard Podcast on Instagram. We look forward to you joining us. See you soon.
Welcome to Be Hero Fights. I'm Tom.
And I'm Brian.
And we are here to discuss
Or fuss.
over two hotly debated, highly related topics.
Last week, we had a fantastic fight between Randy Couture and George St. Pierre. But not who the better fighter was. No. Who the better actor was.
Exactly. Two of the biggest names in UFC that are now that actually have been in the field of acting and in movies for a while now, and so we wanted to put them head to head in honor of the UFC event that happened.
Yes. And what an amazing event that was. If you guys haven't gotten to see it, go back and watch it. It was insane.
Yeah.
And the fight we just had for that was insane as well. We did bring in a ringer, a dear friend of Tom's named Danilo, who has had family and dealt with MMA stuff.
Fighting.
He's been
From
in
Brazil.
martial arts. Yes, he's been in martial arts himself. So go back and watch that episode as well, just so you can see how amazing that fight was. See if you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of great things to say. Honestly, like he brought it. I was not disappointed with the ruling. I think he did a fantastic job. He really knows his stuff when it comes to UFC, and he let his nerd cred shine as well. He did a fantastic job.
Yes, and he destroyed you like Hoist Gracie did in the very first UFC fight.
That is not true.
All right. Well, that being said, we have another great episode for you this week. But before we jump into that, I want to introduce over here to my right, we are bringing back my dear friend Brandon, also known as Leo Wolf, a professional wrestler like myself and former tag partner of mine. And we are going to be bringing him in for this very special episode, which we will talk to you about in just a second. Welcome back, Leo.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Awesome.
Hey, bro. It's going all right. So, first of all, I see you haven't changed since our last episode.
No, not at all. I felt like wearing the same attire was very fitting.
It's a good call. All right. Well, before we go into talking about this new fight we have and what a great fight this will be, let's go ahead and go back in some of the comments we've previously had.
Yeah. So recently we featured our Ghouls Everywhere episode. It was an episode on a week where we couldn't get together, and so I was just kind of slapped together a fun little ghoul experience, zombie experience, for you modern horror fans. So we had a handful of comments. So we asked, like, what would you do to prepare for a ghoul or zombie outbreak, and what would you use to protect yourself, and also on the offense. So we got some comments from some of you. Alicia said, I would set up a fortress. A moat would come in useful. When does a moat ever not come in useful? I fantasize. I have dreams, vivid dreams about having a moat around my house filled with alligators and a gate that drops down. That's really a life goal of mine.
That explains so much why you wet the bed so often.
Shut up.
In addition to that, we also had another great comment from Melanie saying, I would have... let's try that again. I, for one, have no delusions that I would actually survive any kind of zombie apocalypse. Therefore, I plan to sit back and watch the world burn until I, too, am inevitably consumed, or take my weapon of choice, raid the local armor surplus store, remove all those in my way, become a post-apocalyptic dictator a la Negan from The Walking Dead. That depends on my mood, I suppose.
Understandably.
First off, Melanie, too many big words. I am not sober enough for all of those big words.
Reading is hard for Brian.
It is. But I agree wholeheartedly with that. You have really two options in the world of zombie and or ghoul apocalypses or apocalypse that would happen. Either you could aim to just be like, whatever.
Acceptance?
Acceptance. Just taking it back in my lawn chair and tell someone to bite me and they agree. Or go after the best weapon you can and maybe a baseball bat, and you destroy a poor little Asian man and make everybody cry on TV.
I mean, having personally survived the Ghouls episode, definitely I'm a fighter. You know, that Desert Eagle came in handy as well as my 12 gauge. And, you know, it just never hurts to have a football helmet and some pads and a vicious attitude.
Right?
Also, so Mike, our friend from Showboys podcast, big fan of first of all, I'm a big fan of their show. They're a big fan of ours. But he chimed in. He said, that was great. We've been on a Community kick, best sitcom ever. And I think I would have to go with Troy's Halloween costume from season 2 for my armor. Seemed to work well for him. Then I might have to take McCone's amazing sword from The Walking Dead as my weapon, though I'm not sure how my armor and weapon could work together.
Before you go on, I want to correct it real fast so we don't have anybody from The Walking Dead hate us. It's Michonne.
Apologies.
Hey.
I only watched season 1, and I watched it when it came out, and I'm not a fan.
But, Mike, of course we agree with you. We're all on the same wavelength. And for sure, guys, go and watch the Show Boys. They have a YouTube page as well as a great podcast to listen to.
Absolutely.
So, all right. And then, again, I get another Mel. This one is a different Mel, though. Mel says, after a lot of research, I don't know much about zombies. Failure. Jeez. I decided to have fun with this. If anything goes, including fictional armor / weaponry, the mithril and lightsaber. Good choices. If we're going to... What?
Sorry, go on.
If we're going for actual things, then Kevlar for the armor because it's lightweight. And I guess a rifle and machete for the weapon.
I think it's a good choice. I mean, first of all, mithril, they ain't biting through that.
No.
That's mithril and a lightsaber. You are an unstoppable force at that point. Like,
Yes. You were the ultimate
No pun
hobbit at that
intended.
point.
yeah. And then, Kevlar, like that'll stop a 9mm, no problem. So no tooth is biting through that.
Yeah, again, it's a good choice. Failure for Mel not knowing anything about zombies. My suggestion is to go read Max Brooks' Zombie Survival Guide. It's a great choice for learning everything you need to know about zombies and ghoul survival.
Yeah.
So, also, random fact, if you guys didn't know, the reason we went with ghouls is because that was originally what they were called. In the Night of the Living Dead, they never mentioned them as zombies. They were always ghouls. And they were written in the script as ghouls. It was later on that they became zombies.
Yeah, zombie is actually from Haitian culture.
Yes.
And actually, really was not anything even really not remotely similar to what it is now. It was actually more what would happen is a voodoo priest would poison someone, make them appear dead.
Yep.
It would slow their heartbeat down so that they would appear dead. They would have a burial, a funeral, and then he would dig them up and give them, basically put something in them to help wake them up out of that, detoxify them. But because it had been so long, they were completely brain dead, and they would become his slaves.
Yep.
And he would use them for labor. So a little culture, Haitian culture for you there. That's actually, that's what zombies actually were.
Yes, and to bring it back around, a very famous voodoo person is from wrestling, known as Papa Shango. So,
Shango.
that being said, this episode is about professional wrestling.
In honor of?
We have one of the biggest events all year for the WWE known as the Royal Rumble, which has been going on for almost 30 years. Yeah, almost 30 years for the Royal Rumble. It is one of the biggest events the WWE has, probably their second event that's right up next to WrestleMania. In fact, this is what they call the beginning of the road to WrestleMania, which is where all of their storylines and everything else building towards WrestleMania start from.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a huge event. And that being the fact, we are going to do a fantastic episode of which is the better place for you to go to as a wrestler. Would you prefer to be in the big leagues, such as WWE, AEW, WCW, Impact, or is it better to stick around in the independent circuits, such as where myself and Leo are from, Devotion Championship Wrestling, as well as so many others, including Ring of Honor, ROH, and again, just so many to list. Almost every state has a place that you can go and wrestle from and learn from. So that is what our debate's going to be. And being myself and Brandon here are wrestlers, we are going to be fighting upon this. And Tom, who knows nothing about wrestling, will be the one who's judging. So with that
I'm
being
like
said,
nodding my head like I totally
like-
know what he's talking about. Yeah, WrestleMania and stuff. Yeah, that's what's going on. Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about.
how are
I
we even
just
friends?
made
Should
an
be
ass out of
interesting.
myself.
Yeah.
Should be interesting.
How are we even
Brandon
friends?
over here is
Jeez.
like, hey, Brian, can I like destroy him right now? Can I pile drive him into the table?
Oh,
I
I'm
mean,
totally down for
There's
this.
definitely a table right here we can definitely use.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I can pick you up over my head and toss you right through it.
For sure.
It would be fun for me if I could do that.
I mean,
it'd
look,
be fun for the audience.
Oh,
it
yeah.
would be
it'd
great for the
entertaining.
audience. I've already got broken ribs, so if you could land me on this side, so maybe we can even out the breakage.
Maybe.
That's
maybe.
not how
No?
that works.
That's not how that works?
No.
I'm
You're just destroyed after that. But I don't know if I want to do that since you're the judge of this company.
Good call. With that being said, and Brandon, that since you're our guest, which would you prefer to fight upon?
Ooh, that's a hard one because we're in the independence right now. So
Yes.
I love the independent scene. I always have. But I've always wanted to shoot for the big leagues. So I think I'm going to go with the big leagues.
Okay, it's a good choice. And I guess that means I will get the independent circuit. So, again, with you being the guest, sir, why don't you start off? Tell
Holy
us.
cow, here we go.
Tell us about the professional circuit, like the big leagues, as it were, what they are, and a little history about all that.
Ooh, history. Never really been good with history. But
It's a good
I'll-
thing you're pretty.
I know, right?
look at that beautiful face.
But no, to start with, I think most of every aspiring wrestler wants to be a part of the big leagues. Usually it was WWF, now the WWE, just because they went through that whole transitional phase between WWF, WWFE, and, the fight with World Wildlife Federation. But anyways, no, I've as a wrestler, I've always wanted to be a part of the big leagues. I wanted to be the big champion for WWF or WWE. But there's more than just WWE out there.
Yes, sir.
There's now, I mean, well, even back in like the 80s, into the 90s, you had NWA, and then you go transfer into WCW, which was a big league. Nowadays, it's more like WWF, and now you have the new guys on the block, AEW. There's a few others, that are good places to be that are considered the big leagues.
This is true.
So I think on my standpoint, as much as I would love and want to be a part of WWE, I would at least want to give that one good run if I could ever get a job there. But for me, I think right now is AEW. You have, from what I heard, you have more creative standpoint. You get to do a little bit more with your own character work. You get to do a little bit more of what you want and what you want to show the fans and get people invested to. So I don't know. It's more widespread. A lot more people watch the big leagues.
Yeah.
So therefore, more people see it. The more people see you, the more of a name you are in households, and then ultimately the more money you make. I mean, it's not all about the money, but if you want to make a living off of it, I think that's a good way to go. Is go for the big leagues. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's definitely a good choice. And with the WWF, or World Wrestling Federation / World Wrestling Entertainment, or AEW, All Elite Wrestling, or even some of the other ones, such as Impact and so many more that you can have with the big names, there is that aim for it. That's where you'll be well known, where you'll make your money and everything else. But nobody starts there. You don't just start in the WWE. You don't just start in AEW, or very rarely do you. Everybody almost always starts in the independents, which well before the WWE or WWF or even WWF, which is what it was known as before that in the early 80s, before the early 80s, excuse me, or WCW, were known as the territories. So all around the U.S., and they did this in Europe and things like that too, you had some of the big name companies that would be the ones that you would work for. So WCCW in Texas, or Big South in Florida and Georgia and things like that. Missouri had its own territories. Here in where we're at in Salt Lake, they had the AWA, or American Wrestling Association. The NWA was kind of a through point. It was kind of like the version of the WWE back in the territory days, because it was kind of
no, NWA was straight out of Compton.
Oh my!
Really?
Slap you so hard.
I had to.
This table is even more enticing at the moment right now. You speak of that.
Don't you dare put anyone above Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, and Snoop Dogg, who wasn't really part of it.
Snoop Dogg was not part of NWA. You just lost all your credibility.
But hold on, Snoop Dogg has made appearances on both, actually, WWF and AEW.
It's true.
Within the past year or two.
Yeah.
So
it kind of brings it around.
Anyways.
But boom, sir. Boom words. All right. Bringing it back. But the territories are kind of what the independent circuit is now. In almost every state, there is some form of professional wrestling. And surprisingly, most people don't realize that there is here wrestling in Utah, which is who we wrestle for, Devotion Championship Wrestling. But there have been several over the decades that have been here as well. There was, again, AWA, which had their main draw was in Minnesota. That was where they were out of, but they reached all the way out to here. NWA, like I mentioned before I was rudely interrupted, was kind of the through point. So being part of the NWA as a territory made it so that you had the opportunity to send both your guys and bring the bigger names to your federation and or promotion, and have a little bit more knownness. Like you were a bigger company because you were affiliated with the NWA or AWA, because the AWA kind of did a similar thing later on. And the WWE, AEW, they do a similar thing like that now, but they do it in a very limited capacity for the independents, where, as an example, where we work for with Devotion Championship Wrestling, we have ties to some of the big corporations. Not that we're affiliated with them by any means, but because of it's a scenario of somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody scenario. We have those affiliations, but it's a very loose style of that.
Yeah, but wrestling is like a brotherhood anyways. So back before the 80s, you had to be a part of the brotherhood to be a part of wrestling.
For sure.
So with you saying that connection, that's like a connection to the brotherhood in connection to trying to get into the big leagues, right?
Well, at the time, in the territory points, and it was very much it was more to how independent circuit is now, where you would be working 6 nights a week at a promotion, or maybe going on a tour in a promotion, which means that you'd be going from town to town to town with a promotion 6, 7, 8 a week, doing similar matches over and over again. And it wasn't for a big league name by any means. Like in the old days with WCCW in Texas, you would have the Von Erichs who would work around all of Texas and doing almost the exact same match that they may have with, say, the Fabulous Freebirds. Exactly the same match over and over again, but in a different area because it was so different. And you only got into that brotherhood if you paid what was called your dues, which people use as now as a monetary amount, so money.
It's not money though. Dues is not all just money.
It is more of that now.
Yeah.
People see that as that now, but in the old days, that was not how it was. In the old days, paying your dues, besides paying who trained you, but literally like the training which you would receive back then was to learn how to not die in the ring, and then be thrown in the match against somebody and learn on the fly for everything. And if somebody liked you enough, they would help train you up the rest of the way. Or if they saw something in you, they would do that. Otherwise, you would never make it through that brotherhood. And nowadays, you can go to a wrestling school and pay $3,500 to go and take a 12-week course and learn how to do all of the things. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be in that brotherhood or make it, because there's not really that mentality to help people up anymore, because everyone's trying to get to that one spot that the big leagues have, instead of allowing people to learn from each other, to mentor each other in the independence, which is what I think needs to be done now. So
It's being mentored.
yeah,
Just I mean, the way I look at it now is that I think everybody should try to help everybody out and try to get to a certain point. We all have a common goal. You know, we're all trying to get somewhere. I mean, some are just wanting to be independents. I don't hate on anybody that just wants to be independents, because that just could be what you love, what you like, where you like to be. But, you know, I aspire to be somewhere further along, you know. But I think in helping everybody out to get to that point, you know, I think it's a better environment to work in. For sure. So, like, certain environments are toxic because there's one or two guys that are like, you know, I'm the top guy, or no, I'm the top guy, and I want to keep this guy that just started, like, meh, you know. And that's kind of like what sucks about a lot of the territorial days is that's even being brought into brotherhood, you were still kind of shoved down and not brought up until you were deemed worthy.
yeah, you
know,
paid your dues.
and you paid your dues. But a lot of things changed now. A lot of attitudes have changed now, even in the big leagues, where, like, if you prove your worth and you know, you do a good job and you put on good entertainment and you're good to your environment that's around you, you're given opportunities now. But it's that much harder now than it was before, because, like, before you brought into the brotherhood, there might be like 10 or 15 in one territory. Now you're chasing after it like by the thousands.
Yeah.
You know, so it's even harder.
Well,
But-
let me go with this.
Let's pause for just 1 second. I'm gonna make a phone call. We're gonna call a fan and get their input on this topic real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna be calling Scott. Scott has been on the show before, actually. He was
Scott
part of our
SB Nation.
Scott of SP Nation. He was a part of our Christmas toy craze debate, and he's a big fan of wrestling. And we're gonna get his input real quick.
All right, so
Okay.
I guess we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
I'm waiting!
Well, welcome, guys. Welcome back. We went and did a quick call, and I say quick as it took us like 7 minutes, to get Scott from SB Nation to join us here. Scott, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Well, thank you for joining us, Scott. Just real quick, go ahead and throw out your info about SB Nation.
Well, SB Nation is my podcast. I talk about stuff like pop culture, science fiction, all the good stuff that everyone wants to hear about. This upcoming week, I'm doing an episode versus where it's going to be Power Rangers versus Voltron because they're kind of the same thing. So it's going to be a fun episode.
Right on.
And what's up?
It's a right on, man. I'm excited to hear that one.
Heck yeah. I'm excited to actually do research on it because I didn't do any last episode.
Yeah, so Scott,
Yeah.
you're a big friend of ours on the show, and we've been on your show, you've been on ours, but we're in the middle of a debate right now. Brian and Brandon are going head to head. They've actually been in the wrestling world for quite some time now.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them have a lot of experience, but they are fighting over what is better, independent or professional wrestling, and we wanted to get a third-party opinion real quick.
And just to clarify, it's the difference between like the independent circuits, like where myself and Brandon wrestle for Devotion Championship Wrestling, or is it better to be somewhere like the WWE or AEW, WCW back in the day, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm wrestling on behalf of the independent circuit. Brandon's fighting on behalf of the big names. So.
Okay. Sweet.
All right. Well, with that being said, we did a little intro about both of them, what the big names are and what the independent circuit is. So now we're going to go ahead and actually get into the debate. So, Brandon, tell me why I am...
First, Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Sorry, Scott.
Well, I'm a pretty big old school wrestling fan. Like the era that I watch is, the 80s, the 90s, up to about like 2008. Then it just like it lost total interest to me. But like as far as what they're doing now currently, I really like what AEW is doing. I literally just saw a video on Diamond Dallas Page's video of Diamond Dallas Page on AEW, and I never thought he was going to come back to wrestling. But I do like what WWE is doing with their women's division. I think there's a lot of really good talent there. I'm personally a really big fan of Sasha Banks. Becky Lynch is really good, even though, with her being pregnant, don't know when or if she's coming back. So I think WWE definitely has lost a few steps creatively, plus all the backstage stuff that you hear about them where they have to change storylines like 10 minutes before an episode goes on TV. It's just like it sounds like it's so like chaotic in that atmosphere.
Very true. Have you ever been to an independent show?
I've been to 2 or 3, but it was like, man, this was like 2007, 2008, and it was like I'm actually originally from Iowa, so it was like a small town Iowa fair event, but it is kind of cool because I actually got to meet and got a Polaroid picture with Harley Race.
Nice.
So
Oh, nice.
that was pretty cool. But
The original king.
yeah, huh?
Harley Race was one of the first people to ever do the king gimmick.
Yeah, and he was also the I believe he was the innovator of the flying headbutt too, if I remember.
Yes, which he very much hated for the rest of his life.
Yeah, exactly.
So, right
Plus,
on.
I'm sure-
As we're going to go on, Scott, by all means, chime in if you have any questions or thoughts to go along with what we're saying, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Are we ready, sir?
We are ready.
All right. So, Brandon,
Yes.
why are the big names the better place to be?
Ooh. I would say,
And you'd be wrong.
huh?
And you'd be wrong.
I would not be wrong, sir. I think, like, I don't even know if I can even make a choice between or fight on behalf of WWE or AEW, but I would think just because, If you have a decent contract and you're well known, I think your quality of life would be better. You know, as far as on the turn of the money you make, and you know, and with your status, you'll be able to afford better things for your life and your family.
Okay. Well, it's definitely a bonus to that. The downside to that, though, is it's a relative problem. You see this all the time in mostly WB. We haven't yet seen it in AEW just because they haven't been around as a company long enough. But you saw this with Impact as well, and for sure saw it in WCW, where these guys, these great workers, would come on, and then all of a sudden they'd only be around for a couple of months because creative had nothing for them. Something would happen, someone would get injured or whatever, and just ruin their storyline. And instead of making something new for that guy to do or giving them a push of some variety, they would just cut him. We see it all the time still. A great example currently is Keith Lee. You and I both have had the opportunity to meet Keith Lee. You worked Keith Lee.
I've been in the ring with Keith Lee. He's an awesome worker.
And he's amazing. He's one of the best workers I've seen come around in the WWE or anywhere in a long time. And he's such a humble dude.
Yeah, he's a good guy in the back. He's pretty awesome.
But, you know, the WWE brought him up right out of NXT after he was having some great runs in there and was pushing him to the moon. And then all of a sudden something happened, and now creative has nothing for him, so he's barely around. I'll be surprised to see if Keith Lee stays around for another year. That's the downside to the big names. There are so many people trying to get to it that the spots are limited, and once you make it, you're not guaranteed to stay there. So, yeah, you might make big money, but how long are you making that big money for? Nothing's guaranteed. Not to mention, you're working 300-plus days a year when there's not COVID to be on the road or doing something so you're away from your families all the time. Now, don't get me wrong. If WB came to my door right now and offered me a contract to go work for them, I would be there in a heartbeat. My wife would yell at me for not talking to her first, but I would be there.
And I would yell at you for not talking to me first.
Oh. Like I said, my wife. But I would be there in a heartbeat because it is that dream. Every wrestler has that dream to make it big. But realistically, what happens is you make it big, and then if you're lucky, you'll stay. You'll stay for a while. You may make a great career out of it. A good example of someone who made a great career out of it is The Miz. He lucked out to making a great career of it, but he's also one of the few who were trained by the WWE, trained through the WWE system, so he knew what to do to stay there. Not everybody gets that.
So what you said before, where people always start in independence, that's not always true, because The Miz started out in the WWE. Also, The Rock started out in WWE.
Did not, but yes, okay.
Oh, he didn't?
No, The Rock was originally trained by one of his family members and started off in working in a Florida promotion that one of his family members ran, and then was then passed up to OVW, and then passed on from OVW up from there.
But OVW was a farm for WWA.
It's just
or
true.
WWE.
But that doesn't mean that he started there.
So I would like to ask you both a question. Okay.
I'm married, so we just went over this.
A different question for each of you. Having personally worked in the entertainment industry, specifically as a musician, there are a couple things that are, I guess, common critiques. For musicians that make it big, it's incredibly common for people to say you sold out. When you go from independent, when you go from a creator that's in full control, and then you go to signing contracts and you go to the big leagues or whatever, as they say in music, it's very common for you to lose fans, lose steam, lose headway. Now on the flip side, so I want you to answer that, Brandon. Yeah. Let's talk about that, and then for you, Brian, I would like you to talk about the entire point of being in the entertainment industry is to entertain people. Wrestling is no different from that, right? You are there to entertain, and the best wrestlers are the best entertainers. The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin. the only names I know.
I was gonna say you ran down the list of people you know in the ring.
Yeah, I ran out. Goldberg. That was a guy, right? Anyways, for those that stay independent, what are they missing out on? Are they missing out by not reaching their full potential of being able to entertain people?
Well, Brandon, go ahead with yours first.
Well, I mean, I think what you lose in creativity, which sucks in some of the big leagues, there are contracts that give you full creative control over your own character while you're out in the ring. Now, no matter what, the big leagues are going to have this big picture for this big marquee that they're trying to get, they're trying to sell. They're trying to sell tickets, they're trying to sell merchandise. But there's still parts of the character that you could still be creative with, you know, within the ring. It's always said, even down from the independents, is what you have control is in between the ropes. That's what you have control. That's your creativity. You can be creative in that and put out to not just like 30, 50, maybe 500 people, but millions of people, your creativity. That's why I feel like that's a good playing field for most wrestlers, is to be able to reach more people instead of the locals.
Yeah, but going with that, you do get more creative, or you do lose creativity in the big names, but you have more of that view that people can see you, right? An example, a friend of Devotion Championship Wrestling, someone we just recently got to meet. Well, I did. I don't think you did. Ray Lloyd, also known as Glacier.
Glacier.
Who worked for WCW for several years. He was brought on to WCW after doing a lot of dark matches for them to do the Glacier gimmick for the sheer fact that he knew martial arts.
For those that don't know, what's a dark match?
Dark match is non-televised, so it's only for the people at the show. An independent match in a sense, just like how we would do it, just it's not on TV.
Yeah.
But he talked about how his creativity was very limited on what he could do because Eric Bischoff, who's the one that came up with the idea for him to work with it, was very strict about what he had to do for everything. The only thing that he did have was, as you mentioned, between the ropes. He got to choose what kind of finish he wanted to go with, what the movesets he wanted to go with, and stuff like that relative to that. But he didn't get to choose his look, really, outside of the fact that they wanted him to have blue hair, and he just straight knowed that. But he talks about that. He talked about that recently in a seminar we had with him. But that's just an example. There are several examples similar to that of people that come in from wherever and are given a gimmick that a character that they don't know how to work with it, and they don't really have a lot of creativity for it because of such. And a lot of great named guys get stuck with that. Another example is Rob Van Dam. So pre-ECW, Rob Van Dam was brought into the WWE as a jobber, a guy who loses all the time. And he was brought in under a really dumb name, and his whole thing was he was kind of an idiot who just wore his stuff inside out and things like that. It was just so bad. Another one was the Raven. Raven, who was brought into WCW, known as Scotty the Body, who did not have much of a body by any means. That was the gimmick he was stuck with, right? And he had to go with that. And he didn't make himself known and became world famous until he went back to the independents at ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, which then became kind of a bigger name.
ECW's that weird haze, though. It's kind of independent, but kind of big name-ish.
But it had all the flavors of what an independent has. It's kind of like how we are with Devotion Championship Wrestling, where we are televised, so we deal with dark matches. We know how to work with TV and things like that, but we're not big names, so we have a lot more full control on our character. And you had that in ECW. So Scotty the Body became Raven, right? Which is what his gimmick was. He was able to run with forever. Similarly, Gangrel. Gangrel had a really dumb gimmick as a jobber in WWE for years until he was taken out and put into the independents, came up with the concept for the Gangrel gimmick after ripping it off of Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop game. and then went back into WWE with that gimmick and was huge. He still works independence right now as Gangrel because that was so well taken care of. So independence is where you get to create who you are. So you may make it big, but you'll never stay big unless you're The Rock or Austin or Goldberg. And you always go back down to the independence, which is what's happened with Raven, what's happened with Glacier, what's happened with Gangrel. Now, what was the question you asked me?
He went on.
What do you lose out on by staying independent? As an entertainer.
Okay.
What do you miss out?
Your goal is to entertain people, as many people as you can. Like I said, I was a musician. I was in a band, a heavy metal band, and obviously I wanted to make it big, but there was definitely that dynamic, that balance. So how do you?
Well, the easy answer I can give you for that of what you lose out on from being in the independents going to the big name is, in a sense, the people. So you have thousands of people in attendance, millions around the world, right? In the WWE. But how many of them do you get to meet on the daily, right? Unless you're going to a signing or you're going to some photo op or whatever, you don't really go out of your way to meet them. Like, you don't have that interaction. When you're working an independent show, one of the best parts about working that is after the show is over and taking photos with the fans. Even Scott mentioned that he got to take a photo with a wrestler or right after that, his fair show, right? You get that stuff all the time in the independents, and you lose out of that connection that you get with the fans. The other part, too, is that you lose out on is, in a sense, trying new material. So in a band, right? You're going on tour and you want to try out a new song you guys have been working on and whatever. And you try it out at, hey, we got some new music. Let's try this out. You try that out there. You don't get that opportunity per se in WWE. You might get it in a dark match and stuff, but you don't get the opportunity to try out new material per se in the same way. An independent show, you're working a show in, say, Colorado. Let's say you're working in Denver, right? Mm-hmm. You work a show in Denver. You do a move, doesn't play. You decide to take that move to Kansas City the next night. You will do that same thing, do that same move, same spot, and then it plays there. And you keep trying it out until either it works or it doesn't, or you figure out where it goes. You don't get that opportunity in the big names to try stuff like that out. You have to try that out in a training thing to figure out if it's going to work. You don't get that interaction with people. You don't get the ability of honing your craft in the same method. And then you lose out on character work. You can change it. Like myself, I just changed my gimmick up for wrestling for almost 16 years. I wrestle under the gimmick name of Mean Mike. I'm just a mean guy who's a bad guy majority of the time that just likes to pop somebody in the mouth, that kind of scenario. But I recently changed it to now where I'm a good guy, that I don't have that exact same aspect. I'm the original Mike Burke, and it's more of being an original for Utah Wrestling and Devotion itself. And I'm not going out there just to harm somebody and beat them to win at any cost. I'm going out there to show I'm an original, to show that I'm the best, but as best as I can.
Okay. So before we go into final thoughts, Brandon, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that, but I'm going to just ask a couple prompt questions to help with the argument. I want you, so with what Brian was saying about being able to work with the fans, that much more personal connection that you can have at an independent show. What's your response to that as far as, being able to work with the audience versus the notoriety that you get being a big timer, big wrestler? And how do you feel about, once you make it in the big leagues, honing your craft?
Well, I think that all depends on the superstar or the wrestler itself, because person to person, if they take the time to meet the people, I don't think it matters if it's independents or the big leagues. But big leagues, you get more the extra fans, as I call them, the ones that are kind of scary to talk to. But but nonetheless, you could still take your time and talk to as many as you can, probably even more, because you have the notoriety of that big star feel, But honing your craft, there's still time to do so. There's still time to, hone your craft. Like, so WWE has their own, like, farm, should I say, called NXT, and a lot of guys are able to train there and hone in their craft and work out their things. Before then, there were house shows, there were live events that were not televised that they can try out certain scenarios, certain character play-ons, and certain moves or certain move sets to kind of get a reaction out of the crowd, and then use that later on if it worked out live. Use it later on, like on the show. Like when they were bringing up Kane, they tested Kane out at a live show, and at first, that Kane had a cape, which is like the weirdest thing ever. He's like a evil superhero deal, whatever. Dun, 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 dun. But no, they worked it out, and they scrapped the cape and then brought him up to a main storyline with The Undertaker. Yep. So, I mean, there's some things you can hash out in the big leagues to be able to put across the masses.
Okay.
I had a quick question real quick.
Yep.
Do you think it's with WWE having NXT where you're brought up solely in a WWE environment, you work in the WWE system, do you think that actually hinders your abilities a little bit versus going around to other independent promotions and getting more road experience, more just experience in general from other wrestlers, other promoters, finding out from other people outside of that bubble how to make things work differently? Or do you think it's better to go directly to Florida, NXT, WWE, and move out from that bubble?
That's a good question. Well, the thing is that it's not just NXT anymore. It's not just WWE. There's also AEW. They have a place that they pull from too.
Nightmare Factory.
The Nightmare Factory
out in Atlanta.
So, I mean, honestly, it's hard to fight on either side of the fence as far as independence / big leagues, except the fact that in the big leagues you have a lot of legends, a lot of knowledge to pull from, a lot more knowledge than you do, say, from the normal local jobber guy in the independents. So that would be my fight, that you can learn a lot more from like Ric Flair or something like that instead of just a local independent guy.
And I agree with that. But to go along with this, what Scott's asking.
Real quick, final thoughts.
Let me answer Scott's first.
Yeah. Okay.
So with the Motion Championship Wrestling, again, where we're at, we have a lot of ties with other companies. We do have ties with the Nightmare Factory, and then we also have ties, an actual affiliation with OVW, who was previously the farm or NXT-like thing for WWE. And we do get trained in the WWE style there. In fact, all of the people that we train, and myself being one of the trainers there, we train in a WWE style, how to work camera, how to deal with things, and so on and so forth. But one of the things we do in addition to that is we do have our new talent that comes in after we start getting them in the matches and things to go out with some of our older vets on road shows. Like when we go out and have them work for other promotions to understand where all of that comes from. The Triple H has a great story about this in a book he wrote. Was it from his book? I can't remember where it was from. But he talks about how you can go in and think you know everything. But if you don't learn from the history of both wrestling and everything else, you won't know anything. Triple H, by the way, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, he is famous for just scouring over old wrestling stuff. A lot of his moveset comes from old wrestling stuff, and he's a grand example of that. He was trained under Killer Kowalski, and Killer Kowalski was also a big fan of making sure that people went through the territory system on learning how to do all of that too. So I think going through the independents is almost a rite of passage and a need for every good worker to learn, because like I mentioned before, you might not make it in the WWE, or creative might just not have anything for you in the WWE, But if you don't know how to work the independent system, and mostly not how to get screwed over by a crooked promoter in the independent system, you aren't going to be able to do much out of that. It's like people after football. Once they left football, what are they going to do? So final thoughts.
Yeah. Brandon, why don't you go ahead and start?
Well, for me, big leagues, chasing that dream, that's something where I would always want to be. As far as like a good place to be, if you have a decent contract, you have decent backing, you have all the knowledge at your fingertips to get even better in the big leagues, you still get to have a chance to advance your character, work on your moveset, work on getting better at entertaining the crowd. I just feel like just the knowledge base that you have in the big leagues would help you further your career. And not even just that, getting known through the masses in the big leagues, that furthers your chances, not just in the big leagues, but even further, like in an entertainment business. It's an entertainment business, so you get even more opportunities through the big leagues. It's like movies and stuff like that. So I think I would definitely want to be at my home, would want to be in the big leagues, whether it be, I have my personal choices, but whether it be WWE, AEW, back in the day, WCW, NWA, that's where I want to be, just for the simple fact of being in front of more people.
Yeah.
And add on to that, like, of course, as a pro wrestler, every pro wrestler has the dream to be in the big company. But not everyone's going to make it. There are thousands, and we've met thousands of workers. Some that you look at and are like, oh, for sure he's going to make it, like when Keith Lee and Karrion Kross, when we dealt with him, and things like that. But then you see a lot of guys are like, bro, I'm sorry, but you're never making it big. And with that, you'll never know if you're going to be able to make it big unless you try. But once you've got there, and like I make reference to the NFL, you might make it big, but if you don't have something to fall back onto, you're going to lose out. Another great example of this is a friend of ours, Marlon Jackson, who played for the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens, as a halfback. He did that for several years, and football fell through for him. And so what did he do? Became a professional wrestler and is working on the independent circuit, including Devotion Championship Wrestling. So, yes, it is everyone's dream to get there, but always know that you have a fallback on working the independents. So the independents is the place to be, to learn your craft, to hone your craft, and to always have a home to come back to, even if the big leagues don't make it. Not to mention, with 1,000 people and only having a handful of spots, the WWE right now has 3 shows that you might luck out and make one of the 25 spots that they have in the storyline right now. AEW, very similar. Impact, ROH even, which is kind of a mix between big and independent. You're never going to have a guaranteed opportunity. You will strive your whole life to try to do so. But having that feeling, that what I call the crack of going out to a show and being in front of that crowd, listening to that crowd, you get that with the independents without having to fear that you're going to lose out into the WWE or big names because you screwed up on something. You screw up that night, that might be your last night with the company. You screw up in an independent, that might be, a thing to learn from for the next time.
All right. Before I give my rulings and final thoughts on the arguments, Scott, do you have any thoughts on what you've heard of the conversation?
Well, I think you guys both make amazing points on it, and there's so much stuff that you don't necessarily know about just from flipping on your TV and watching, AEW or WWE. There's so much that goes into, what you guys do in that ring. You have to plan out every single thing you do, or, that pile driver that you do, you're going to end up, having a Steve Austin incident where you have a serious neck problem, or you have, the Shawn Michaels thing where your back is seriously screwed up and you still are working through that. So it's, there's not enough appreciation, I think, for the actual sport part of wrestling, and my belief, because, everyone, and it's partly because of the 80s, because you have the things like, and I really like him, but you have the Ultimate Warrior. And, there's no person out on the street right now doing the things that Ultimate Warrior does unless they are on the strongest shit you've ever seen.
It's so true.
But it's like someone who's more believable. Like a lot of the ECW guys, like Sandman, he was a badass who smashed beer cans against his head and carried a kendo stick. That was a hell of a lot more believable. But when you get into that kind of late 90s current wrestling, it's so lame, it's so boring, it's so this, and it's because everyone got so used to those fictional, oh yeah guys, that it's just like, now when you go out there and try and be, yourself, oh, you're not interesting. What do we do with this guy? There's nothing to him. He doesn't have that spark of someone 20 years ago. Yeah, because that person is trying to be that person. He's not trying to be a character from, the 1980s.
Yep.
So I just think that wrestling in general needs to be looked at more with a more observational eye and not a judgmental eye, because there's so much good stuff about it. When the NWO came out and freaking, I think it was Scott Hall, he like darted Rey Mysterio against that trailer. That was
Kevin
like,
Nash.
oh,
Oh,
shit.
wow.
Oh, okay.
Kevin Nash.
I couldn't
Kevin
remember.
Nash.
Yeah.
And like that felt so real for a change, and everyone was talking about it. And even now, when Randy Orton lit up Bray Wyatt, everyone was like, holy shit, WWE killed a wrestler. It's like, that was awesome, because suddenly that fake TV show turned real. And like I said, it's just, there's so much good stuff in wrestling that people do focus on the negatives, or people think, what happened to Greg Valentine or whatever. He's still working on the independent series or whatever now.
Yep.
And people are like, oh, well, that's a shame that he's still doing that, or he doesn't have any money. Well, maybe he actually likes what he does. Maybe that's his passion, and maybe it is money. But it's just, like I said, it's just people really need to take a better look at it, in my opinion.
Very much
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the input there. Side note, my phone is probably going to die. So if it cuts out all of a sudden, Scott, just be aware. Okay,
So it's going to be an old Yeller situation.
yeah.
Oh.
All right. So there's been a lot of really good points made. Brian, I liked what you talked about of being able to really get a personal connection with the fans. And I also really liked what you said about going professional and then having a home to come back to, being able to come back and bring your presence, back to the people, to the people at the shows, whether it's a blackout show or it's going to be on local network TV. I like that. That's really awesome. Brandon, I really like what you were saying about how you can still progress. You can still hone your character, your skills, your abilities as a professional, selling out. And for the record, I hate when people talk about selling out. Everyone wants to be able to make money with their freaking passion. You fucking skaters out there, you fucking musicians that are giving people shit for signing a contract, wanting to make a living out of their passion, fuck off. I had to get that out. I fucking hate that shit.
I felt that.
Are we bitter?
Yeah.
Slightly.
Anyways, I appreciated that. I liked what you said because again, as an entertainer, the end goal is to reach as many people as possible, and having that notoriety goes a long way. So I think you answered that very well, because Brian, you made an excellent point about being able to connect with the fans every time you do a show and being able to go out and meet them. But I liked how you answered that by saying, like, well, that's up to the wrestler. They don't have to go to the locker room. They can get out there and go meet people. And then having that notoriety, people just recognize you on the street. People can come up and you can have those photo ops. You can have those conversations. So I think you touched on that really well as well. This is actually really hard. I'm still at this very second not sure who I think deserves this win.
I have to pee. Can we wrap?
Danny has to pee.
Well, here he goes.
And Brian wants to pay me. For that,
hold
you
on,
lose.
Hold on.
doesn't
If Brian wants to pay you, if you don't choose me, this table looks very nice right now. Afterwards, it could be very damaging to your health.
How are your ribs, sir?
They're going to be so much better afterwards.
Just so you all know, I broke my ribs a little over a week ago snowboarding, so I do not want to get pile drived into the stable. God, this is really tough. Just because I'm curious, Scott, based on the arguments of what you've heard, who would you pick, Brian or Brandon?
You know, I'm kind of on the fence with you because you guys both picked really good arguments. Like, there's pros and cons of each one, but I would say just to be able to, you know, better provide for your family, be able to provide better for yourself, be able to have some sort of medical coverage and everything, I'd have to say, you know, the professional, you know what I mean?
Big
The
leagues.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Danny, come here real quick. Based on the arguments, go ahead and take this mic, or his mic, yeah. If you had to, who would you pick? I want your thoughts.
I like how Brian said how you do have the home to come to, and you just have the more creativity. I mean, Brandon said that as well, but I think it really honed in on independent.
Yeah.
Wow. That's like right down the middle.
Yeah.
This is intense. This is interesting. I like this.
Right?
Okay, so
We're making him think his brain's going to start on fire.
yeah, it just burst. Okay, you know what?
I'm as much as I want to win. I don't know. I like the independents and I like the big leagues. So it's even for me, even if I was standing on the outside, even though I fought for the big leagues, it's hard to say on both ends because I'm in the independents.
Yeah.
I would be happy with a draw.
We've never really had. I mean, I guess we did. There was the one time the poll didn't work, so we called it a draw.
Yes, it's true.
Look, so here's the thing. I really like even what Scott said of what you said, Brandon. Being able to provide for your family, being able to make a career, a lifestyle, being able to make that. And not even that, Brian, you even kind of echoed that a little bit, saying like it opens up new opportunities in the film industry, which we talked about last week with Randy Couture and George
JSP,
St. Pierre. Yeah, GSP. Like, it does provide a lot of opportunities, but Brian, you also knocked that down by saying like there is no guarantees. You have to work the audience, and it's really a roll of the dice if the audience is gonna buy into it.
Yep.
God. And having a home to come back to. Yeah, no, Danny, like what you said, having a home to come back to, like, you know what? I agree. I think I cannot call this. I'm going to have to call a tie.
First time ever.
Can we do the poll? Go back to poll.
Audience, we're going to give you 2 weeks. We want your thoughts. We want your comments. We want anything you have to say. Tell us who won.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us on the comments here on YouTube. Also, hit us up on all of our social medias, such as
Facebook.com/BeHeroMedia, Instagram.com/BeHeroMedia,
on Twitter at BeHeroFights. And, of course, you can hit us up always on our website at BeHeroMedia.com.
Oh, wait a minute. But you can also find me on Facebook. Leo
don't-
Wolf.
You don't want to find him on Facebook.
You absolutely want to find him on Facebook.
So reach out to us there. Since we currently set with our judges, we are currently at a draw. Let's hear what you guys have to think. Tell us what we got right. Tell us what we got wrong. And maybe we'll end up having to make a change on this one and come back and say one was over the other.
That's right. We're going to give you 2 weeks, 14 days. So hit us up. Let us know your thoughts. We'll put out probably just like some polls in the story because
Yeah.
I know we can do that. But yeah, let's see what you guys have to say.
Put it in the fans' hands.
That's
I like
right.
it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Scott from SB Nation, for being phoned in to join us.
That's right.
One more time, Scott, where can they find you?
You can also find me on Facebook /SP Nation, and you can find me on Twitter at SPNation5, and you can check out my OnlyFans /Betty White Big Boy.
I hope you're not lying because suddenly I have the urge, a strong urge to look this up.
I also want to look it up now. That's a shirt right there. Betty White Big Boy.
All right. And thank you, Brandon, for joining us as well. Do you have an OnlyFans?
No, I do not. But thank you for having me on anyways.
You need to make an OnlyFans and call it the Great Value Thor.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Why not?
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for joining us. And, of course, find us here next week, as always. So let's go ahead and bring this one home.
That's right.
Brandon, I think you know what to do here. So, as always.
Keep fighting.
Oh, sir.
Fight on is the correct
Oh,
answer.
what? Are you serious?
Yes.
Well, fight on then.
We know what you're thinking. Another wrestling podcast. But that's where you're wrong. We're the Seinfeld of wrestling podcast. We talk about life, our wives, our dogs, our girlfriends on the side. So come take a drive, take a seat, and take a mental vacation with the Midcard. New episodes every Saturday, anywhere you get your podcast from, or you can reach out to us on the social media. We're at TMidcard on Twitter, at the Midcard on Facebook, and of course at the Midcard Podcast on Instagram. We look forward to you joining us. See you soon.